Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we're going to be talking about some new events that have been taking place in the Middle East. But before I do that, please make sure you subscribe to the channels that I have. I have 4 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Follow me also on X, GETTR, and Facebook. That way you get notifications. I have a sense that if things get much worse, that there's going to be a huge curtailment of information flow. So you're going to have to make sure that you subscribe to all these different modes so you can get my videos and my audios or whatever, however I need to communicate with you. In addition, go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and you can sign up, for, to give me your email. Just do that in the contact area, contact us section of the website. And that way, when by subscribing, I have your email. So if something happens, I have a feeling that there's going to be curtailment of free speech because of the wars, plural, that are going to start to really flare up in the world. And it's really important. I've been saying this for a while. I said that there was going to be conflict in Asia in 2020, right? In 2020, I said this, that there was going to be conflict in Asia in 2025. And at that time, we didn't know about the flare up in the Middle East. At that time, we were still in Afghanistan. And at that time that I said this, Russia didn't go into Ukraine, and we didn't have this Ukraine kind of conflict, right? But you can kind of see it, how this is all tiptoeing into World War III. I did a show with John last night. It's already published, so you can take a look at that video. I think it's part 18 of the series that I've been doing with John Hogue. So just pay attention. Something big's coming. And the new announcement by Austin, Secretary of Defense Austin, was that we are deploying 2 naval vessels. One is an aircraft carrier, Abraham Lincoln, which was supposed to be going there anyways, to my understanding, but they are increasing the speed to get to the Middle East, right? I'm not sure which way they're coming from. I'm not sure if they're coming from the Mediterranean or they're coming from the Indian Ocean or what. I don't know where it's at. The other is a nuclear sub. There's a lot of naval hardware out there already in the Middle East. This may be the main event. All right. Now, I said that this was about, on a metaphysical level, there's many different levels to this. All right. There was the metaphysical level, and then there's also, how prepared militarily are the Israelis and the United States. This new type of warfare with drones, where they're low cost and you can release a lot of them. We're seeing things that are new in the battle space. The naval fleet in the United States is stretched thin. President Xi has already said he wants Taiwan. Lots of things are happening, and it's not out of the realm of possibility just by using game theory that it gets to a larger conflict. And this is the reason, and I warned about this in 2020. All right, this was tied to the crisis. All right, they're one of the same. They're not independent. Don't think that what happened in 2020 was just a one-off, and that it's only about biologics. It's about international affairs and geopolitical positioning. All right, that's where this is at. All right, so you have to pay attention. And there's going to be, if what I think is going to happen happens, you are not going to be able to communicate like you think that you'll be able to communicate. The ways you're communicating with your friends, your family, with bloggers and everything like that it's going to be curtailed. It won't be completely shut down, but it will be curtailed. And you got to find Low tech means to be able to communicate. This is the reason why you need to subscribe to all my channels, and you need to make sure that you provide your email. And you can provide your email by going to my website, and you can subscribe. Right? When you subscribe, I get your email, and that if I need to do an email send to some sort of Google Drive or whatever, that you can get the information. Be prepared. This is a contingency. You need to start thinking in a contingency kind of frame of mind here. All right. I'm not saying that, go and be a prepper and hide under your bed. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that if this gets hot and heavy, your life, the way you are living right now, is going to be curtailed. So just pay attention. Now, hopefully, this does not happen like I think it'll happen, but I'm just saying you got to warn yourself. You got to prepare. Now, on the metaphysical side, today is a holiday of the destruction of the temples. This is a Jewish holiday, and there's a fast, and there's religious people will fast, and they read certain types of prayers and all this stuff. I'll play a video that goes a little bit onto this, but it is a solemn day. It's a day of remembrance and of renewal. The chance that to look at what we did wrong, and then how we can improve to have the temple back. That's kind of the theme, all right? But it's kind of a mourning because it was the destruction of the temple. Now, there's some deep Kabbalistic stuff on why those temples were destroyed. They go way before even Israel was formed, okay? And it has a lot to do with what the Jews were doing, during the Exodus from Egypt and all this stuff, right? And people don't realize that some of the bad things that one would do in their life may actually have kind of like some sort of like cyclical bad thing that happens. And that's kind of what this holiday is. It's a cyclical thing of a Kabbalistic problem that the Jews during the Exodus did. All right. And it's already set in motion that these destructions had to happen. All right. Okay. So that's today. All right. And there were missiles launched today. There's missiles launched almost every day. So people would say that's nothing special. But there is this kind of like additional concern by the Defense Department of the United States that things are going to escalate here. Now, I said that the 322nd day of the conflict, starting from October 7th, that 322nd day is August 24th of 2024. I said that August 24th is a key date of worry. Another key date of worry that I have is September 24th. So keep your eye on that. It is August 12th right now. All right. So the 24th, is not, is 12 days away. Something big could happen. Now, it could happen before, but I 322 is a bad day, counting from October 7th. In addition, August is the beginning of the strength of Esau and the weakening of Jacob. So that's a problem. That's a big problem. And this is the reason why Netanyahu needed to put a lot more force than he did against Gaza, Hamas, and Hezbollah, and even Iran in April, because that was the strength, that was the max strength for Jacob. But the United States got involved, and Netanyahu, didn't go full force, and this is what happens. this right here, we're in a problem now. I predicted this was going to happen in April, explaining the metaphysics of this, this undulation between Jacob's soul root strength for 6 months and then Esau's soul root strength for 6 months. And we're in this new cycle of strength for Esau. Meanwhile, when it was the peak moment for the strength of Jacob, the United States forcefully held back Netanyahu. The time to really hit hard Iran, Lebanon, and Hamas all at the same time was in April, and they missed the boat. So it's gonna be bad. It's gonna be bloody, and it's gonna potentially bring other conflicts into the fore. You know, Ukraine, people pay attention to it, but does it really matter in your life in the United States? Not really. Conflict in Asia, that's going to affect you. Trust me. So there's these things that are starting to flux. There's more energy happening. And there was a moment in time where you have to hit iron when it's hot. That time to hit the iron when it was hot was in April for the Israelis. That was the time to hit Iran. They missed it. They did some BS, counterstrike. They didn't, that was all for show. That wasn't for carnage. And they missed the boat. And now you got to wait until the end of January, the beginning of February of 2025, before the soul root gains strength again, where metaphysically, it's more aligned to Jacob and not to Esau. It's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. I said that this was going to happen, and it's exactly what has transpired. It's sad, but okay. So it can get really bad here. Hopefully it doesn't, but it's looking like it will. All right. I also did I did a video that's talking about the history of the PRC and the POC, the history of the PRC and the ROC. So this whole conflict between Taiwan and China. So watch that video. All right. So you get an understanding of what was going on from 1912 to 1979. I'm going to do a series of videos because the battle space is in 3 areas. Europe, which people are paying attention to. People are paying attention to the whole Ukraine and Russia. And I've done Vaca Wars, which was a series talking about it. There are people that are really dived into their podcast on just the Ukraine war, and great for them. All right. There's the Middle East and what's happening with Israel, and the other battle space is the Asian theater. All right. With that, please make sure you go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support my work. This video is going to be free. Why is it free? Because people help support the channel by buying the products and donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can also be a paid member on my Patreon channel, and that helps support my work and makes sure that my videos are free. I have thousands of videos out there for people to learn and to get an idea of how to improve their health and how to navigate through this problem, because this will perturb financial markets if this gets bad. It'll perturb energy markets if this gets bad, and it may even perturb agricultural markets if this gets bad.
Believes Tehran is preparing to carry out a major attack in coming days. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says Israel is ready to respond.
Well, the growing tension has the United States deploying an unprecedented array of military assets to the region. Chris Bitchute reports from Jerusalem.
U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ordered the guided missile submarine USS Georgia to the Middle East and told the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier to increase its speed to the region. Austin also spoke with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who told IDF recruits that Israel is ready.
You should know this, that whoever will harm us in a way that he has not acted in the past is also likely to get hit by us in a way that we have not acted in the past. And the IDF has a significant and strong capability.
Alex Trayman of JNS.org tells CBN News if and when Iran and its proxies attack, Israel's response will be robust.
I absolutely expect a much more robust Israeli response, both because it's expected that the attack of Iran will be larger than the attack in April, and it will be a coordinated attack, an attack that includes Hezbollah to Israel's north and possibly the Houthis in Yemen towards Israel's south. So this is a coordinated attack. While the United States says that they want to de-escalate tensions in the region could not be higher.
Hamas escalated those tensions when they refused to join negotiations on August 15th that some hoped would lead to a ceasefire. All these tensions come on the eve of Tisha B'Av, one of the most solemn days of the year for the Jewish people. Many fast and remember the calamities that fell on the Jewish people, like the destruction of the first and second Jewish temples.
So it's a day of major Jewish calamity in history, but at the end of times, it's supposed to be that the Tisha B'Av becomes a day of joy. And we know that this war started on Simchat Torah, which is a major Jewish holiday. The enemies of the Jewish people turned this day of joy, the Simchat Torah, into a day of mourning like Tisha B'Av. So hopefully this conflict will be able to turn Tisha B'Av from a day of mourning into a day of joy.
On Sunday, the IDF refuted accusations it targeted civilians when it attacked a meeting of Hamas terrorists, including a top Islamic Jihad commander.
An area that, according to our intelligence, no women and children were present. You can see in a video published by us today that the compound is still intact and that there is no significant cratering or damage to the main structure of the compound. This pattern of systematic abuse of schools for military activities by Hamas and Islamic Jihad endangers both Gazans and Israeli civilians. It must be condemned by the international community.
In the middle of war and turmoil, an encouraging moment for the Jewish state. As the Olympics closed in Paris, Israeli athletes celebrated their best Olympics ever with a total of 7 medals.
All right, CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now. Chris, just a few days ago, we were talking Iran may have been backing down. Now they're saying a major attack could come within days. What's behind this shift?
Well, you know, it all seems to be like these wars and rumors of wars we talked about, Andrew. Every day, like you said, every day or every few days, the conflicting reports. One explanation could be the internal battles going on within Iran itself. Apparently, Iran's president saying what's important to avoid war. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, on the other hand, wanting to have a large retaliation. On the other hand, but they may be counting the cost as well. How to respond to what happened in Tehran without provoking a full-scale war. Also, Hezbollah may want to avoid a full-scale war, but the rhetoric is there right now, and it could be part of this fog of war as well, Andrew. Nations sending out mixed signals, and sometimes we really don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but we do know God does, and why it's so important to be praying.
Chris, your reporting mentioned the U.S. is bringing in an attack submarine and ordering a battle group to speed up its arrival. What do you make of this military buildup we're seeing?
Well, Andrew, it's a powerful signal. Very rare to announce the president's whereabouts of a nuclear submarine. We know there's a squadron of F-22s. That's a premier fighter for the Air Force. 2 carrier battle groups could be have ability to have a long air campaign, and also signaling to Iran and its proxies not to escalate the situation, and that they're ready to defend Israel.
Now, for weeks, this has been pointing to Iran timing this around a major Israeli holiday, which starts today. How are the Israeli people responding to all this?
Well, they observe this day by fasting 24 hours, very similar to what they do on Yom Kippur. No food or drink. They read from the book of Lamentations. 10 synagogues. There'll be a prayer vigil at the Western Wall tonight, and reflecting on the calamities, but also the hope and redemption of building the third temple. And also a number of people are praying that this curse would be broken, and there'll be mourning that will be turned to rejoicing for the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
Chris, just on Friday, you and I talked about the global prayer movement on Israel's behalf. Tell us about the impact it's having and how people can get involved if they'd like to.
Well, since we talked, Andrew, I've talked to others, and somebody described it sort of like a starter button, but this movement is really multiplying itself, indigenous prayer movements, and then being glued together, really uniting a global prayer. For example, one example people can get involved in is Herrnhut, Germany. They may remember this was home to the Moravian prayer movement. It lasted 100 years. It's being live streamed right now. And really, this is an unprecedented movement. This Paul said the weapons of our warfare are pulling down strongholds. Derek Prince wrote a great book called Shaping History Through Prayer and Fasting. And this prayer can have an impact on what's happening here in the Middle East.
Okay, Chris, thank you so much. We always appreciate your reporting from the.
Okay, so now what I want to do is that I'm going to read off the strike group. Okay, so the Abraham Lincoln is a aircraft carrier, but it goes with the strike group. Okay, now that strike group has 3 separate ships, and then obviously there are planes on the aircraft carrier, right? So the strike group, okay, has the aircraft carrier and the 3 destroyers. So the 3 destroyers are the USS O'Kane, the USS Spruance, and the USS Frank E. Peterson Jr. And the planes that are part, and so that's called Destroyer Squadron 21. All right, the Carrier Strike Group, so CSG, the Carrier Strike Group that's moving is number 3. Okay. Now I'm learning all this, so on the fly, so you can have a better understanding. Because I find that the news is a little just too surface. You need to get a little deeper. Okay, the strike group looks like the Carrier Strike Group looks like number 3, and there's going to be 3 destroyers. You have the aircraft carrier, and what's the aircraft on the carrier? That aircraft that is the FA-18E Super Hornet. Lightning, the F-35C Lightning II, the FA-18E Super Hornet. So there's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There looks like there's 8 squadrons. Okay, so there's 8 squadrons, and the total all the different planes that these squadrons are Seahawk, the MH-60R Seahawk, the E-2D Hawkeye, the EA-18G Growler, and the FA-18E Super Hornet, and the F-35C Lightning II. Okay. Now, 1, 2, 3 of the 8 squadrons are the Super Hornet. Okay, so it seems like they have more of those on the aircraft carrier. Okay, now with that said, so that's some firepower, right? Now, what's in a squadron? I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. So I don't know exactly how many planes. Maybe I can find out. Hold on. 90 fixed wing and helicopter aircraft. So 90. So out of those 8 squadrons, there's 90 aircraft. Okay, the other one, the other ship is a submarine, and that's the USS Georgia. And that's SSGN 729. And that's an Ohio class submarine. It's the second vessel of the United States Navy within the Ohio class. And what's the armament? Armament 4x21 torpedo tubes and 154 BGM Tomahawks. 22 groups of 7. All right, so you got Tomahawks and you got torpedo tubes. And the propulsion is nuclear reactor. Okay, so you have a nuke sub with Tomahawks, and then a nuclear sub with Tomahawks. You have, and then you have the battle group that's tied to the Abraham Lincoln. Wow. Okay. All right. So with that, now I want to go to this here. This is CNN.
With respect to these frontier models, they're so interesting because it's a form of intelligence that we don't know how they'll be used. Remember, they're not trying to solve the
Right, breaking overnight, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ordered a guided missile submarine to the Middle East and asked the carrier strike group to get there as quickly as possible. Israel is bracing for a potential attack by Iran, an attack some anticipate could come within days. CNN national security correspondent Natasha Bertrand is at the Pentagon, and you get a sense of this new urgency everywhere, Natasha.
Yeah, John, the U.S. is really trying to send a very strong message here to Iran and its proxies to essentially back off. And the way they are doing that is by really increasing the number of assets that they have in the region right now, including, as you mentioned, by signaling that they are sending this guided missile submarine, this nuclear-powered submarine, to the region, something that is extremely rare for the Pentagon to actually announce. Usually these submarines operate in relative secrecy. And so to announce that this submarine, which is armed with dozens and dozens of cruise missiles, is going to be deployed to the region really is sending a very loud signal here to Tehran and its proxies that the U.S. is prepared to act on behalf of the Israelis, to defend the Israelis if Iran decides to launch an attack on Israel. And in addition to that, the U.S. has also announced that it is going to be speeding up the deployment of the USS Lincoln carrier to the region, which is set to replace the carrier that is currently in the area, the Roosevelt. It has been operating elsewhere. Now it is going to move quicker to the region following this call that Secretary Austin had with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. All of these if Iran decides to launch an attack on Israel. And in addition to that, the U.S. has also announced that it is going to be speeding up the deployment of the USS Lincoln carrier to the region, which is set to replace the carrier that is currently in the area, the Roosevelt. It has been operating elsewhere. Now it is going to move quicker to the region following this call that Secretary Austin had with Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. All of these deployments were made public last night following that call, in which Austin reiterated to the Israeli Defense Minister that the U.S. is prepared to do whatever it takes to defend its ally. Now, of course, this all comes as the region is bracing for this retaliation by Iran following the Israeli or presumed Israeli assassination of Hamas's most senior political leader in Tehran earlier this month. It has been really widely expected that Iran was going to retaliate somehow. Really, no one knows exactly when or how that is going to happen. But the Pentagon now placing a number of very strategic assets in the region to try to calm tensions, but also, of course, be prepared to help Israel respond if necessary, John.
A region on edge this morning. And Dr. Bertrand, thank you very much.
Okay.
U.S.
And
Defense
see,
Secretary Lloyd Austin.
it's important to understand it. It's important to understand what's going on. So the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group was, as of July 11th, there was a deployment from San Diego, and they were in the vicinity of Hawaii. Okay, then Austin, Secretary of Defense Austin, says, "Okay, speed it up, guys. Get to the Middle East faster." All right, so they're probably just past Hawaii. All right, so it's going to take a little while to get there. But now you understand that when we're moving these ships around, especially when they're getting, refueled or whatever, restocked, resupplied, if there's a conflict in the Pacific and we couldn't move our ships around the world when we need to, it causes a problem. This is the reason why the first island chains are so important in Asia. So people in America, when you want to be a pacifist, when you want to just sit and not be engaged, you start to realize that the whole world that we benefit from is predicated on some sort of hegemonic power. And that if you tone back that hegemonic power, that when something really happens and you need to respond, you can't respond. So this is why what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Europe is related and connected to what is going on in Asia. They're linked together. There are nodes and they're in these stress points. It fluxes and it reconfigures the system. Now, I'm just a guy with a with a camera, videoing for a podcast, and you've gotten more information about what the battle group is and what kind of airplanes there are than anything that CNN did.
Submarine to the Middle East as fears grow of a potential attack on Israel. Meanwhile, another barrage of rockets fired from Lebanon into Israel overnight has further heightened tensions in the region. Hezbollah says it was in support of the Palestinian people and in retaliation for Israel's strikes in southern Lebanon. This all comes just days ahead of Gaza's ceasefire talks due to take place on Thursday. A source says that according to mediators, newly appointed Hamas political leader Yahya Sinwar wants a deal. We have team coverage. CNN's international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson is in Tel Aviv, and CNN's senior international correspondent Ben Wiedemann with the latest from Beirut. Nick, let's start with you. And first, word that we're hearing from the new Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar that he wants a ceasefire deal. What do you make of that?
Honeybook keeps your proposals, contracts, invoices, and payments all in one place. My name is Laura Gomez, and I've partnered with over 100 brands.
It seems to be a way of putting pressure on Israel and potentially putting pressure on President Biden in the White House to put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu to make some compromises in the talks over Gaza, compromises that he hasn't been prepared to partake in before. And the reason for this pressure and the reason for the positioning and the reason that these talks on Thursday are so critical, because it's not just about Gaza. This was put into play, if you will, these talks on Thursday, to try to convince Iran that there was a plausible Gaza ceasefire deal in the works, and therefore not to retaliate at an escalatory level against Israel. But when you see U.S. Secretary of Defense moving additional military assets, speeding them into the region, moving the USS Georgia, this nuclear-powered cruise missile-firing submarine, from the Mediterranean into the Eastern Mediterranean. Those are signals that the US believes that there is the potential that the talks won't go well this week,
I want to
and
repeat that.
therefore that Iran
This is a piece of information.
moving additional military assets, speeding them into the region, moving the USS Georgia, this nuclear-powered cruise missile-firing submarine, from the Mediterranean into the Eastern Mediterranean. Those are signals that the US believes that there is the potential that the talks won't go well this week, and therefore that Iran may strike, or they may interpret the fact that the talks are really not going to be any different to anything in the past, and may interpret that as a signal that they may as well go and have their retaliatory strike against Israel. So all of these features right now, I think, focus on how important those talks are, focus how tenuous they are. Diplomats that I'm talking to in the region who had some hope late last week that a deal could be reached on Thursday are now worrying that that can't happen. And part of it is, and this is Hamas' position as well, that they are not clear what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is going to do, what he'll tell his officials to do at those talks. That's the concern. So while Hamas says it wants a deal, it's also saying that it's not prepared to go to the talks at the moment. This is a very, very delicate situation.
Yeah, it sure is. And in terms of the timeline, I mean, we've been talking so much about when. It's not a matter of if, but when Iran will retaliate against the killing of for a top Hamas leader in recent days. CNN analyst Barak Ravid reported Sunday that two sources say Israeli intelligence has assessed Iran could be planning an attack within days. What are you hearing? And obviously, it does seem, I guess, more imminent with the military posture that we're seeing.
Absolutely, the military posture by the United States tells you that that threat is real and is potentially imminent. Diplomatic sources that I'm talking to say that the hope was that Iran would have a retaliatory strike that was in the limits of the conventions of warfare, not striking at civilians, striking at military bases, and therefore wouldn't cause an escalation. But that cannot be ruled out at the moment. In diplomatic terms, diplomats are looking at this and they can see what's happening in Iran. A new president who's not particularly well bedded in, who is perhaps under pressure from hardliners. They'll see the former foreign minister resigning from his government position as a symbol that the more moderates feel that the hardliners are on the ascendancy in Tehran at the moment. So that sense that Iran could do something that is more escalatory or potentially escalatory is very, very real. It is more on the table now than it felt at the end of last week when there were still hopes about the talks. But the atmosphere around those talks is not positive and is not conducive to a positive or quick outcome. And that was what it was going to take for Iran to be deterred from any escalatory type action.
Some really significant context from you there, Nick, and Tel Aviv. Nick, thank you so much for that. Ben, let's head over to you in Beirut. And as you were saying, Hezbollah reportedly fired some 30 rockets from Lebanon toward Israel. What is the atmosphere like there in Lebanon? And I mean, you've been there for some time. How serious is this as an escalation?
Well, what we saw.
See.
Tonight.
The spiders?
Well, what we saw yesterday was really just more of the same. There has been an incremental escalation or increase by Hezbollah in the amount of attacks it's launching on Israel. Though keep in mind that according to one study, for every one attack Hezbollah launches, there are 6 Israeli counterstrikes. Now, today so far, there have only been 2 strikes claimed by Hamas. So sort of every day is different, but certainly that's these strikes are really within the context of what we've seen going back to the 8th of October when Hezbollah first opened fire on Israel. What, of course, everybody is anticipating, expecting, fearing to some extent is Hezbollah responding to the strike Tuesday before last by Israel that killed a senior Hezbollah commander. Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, has said that response to that assassination is coming. There's no question about it. The question is, what form will it take? And speaking to my diplomatic sources, that they do feel that Hezbollah has sort of talked itself into a corner that, you know, it has to respond, but if it responds too strongly, the Israeli counter response could be very destructive beyond simply the area along the border that has been steadily pounded now going back to October. So in terms of the atmosphere here, what we're seeing is that out of the last 6 days, Israeli warplanes have broken the sound barrier 4 of those days. We're seeing that more airlines are extending their suspensions of flights to Beirut. The latest one is Swiss Air, which has suspended its flights to Lebanon until the 21st of August. But when you go out into the street, you go to restaurants, there's still people there, perhaps less than before because many have left. But I think, as I've said time and time again on CNN, you know, people here have been on this roller coaster where we've seen escalations, de-escalations time and time again. So in a sense, they're prepared for the worst, but they have no choice but to go about their daily lives as best they can.
We are going to go over common pieces of career advice that job seekers get and separate the myths from the truths.
Job hopping is the best.
This is BBC.
Next, the Pentagon says the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered a guided missile submarine to the Middle East and has told an aircraft carrier strike group to sail to the area more quickly. That deployment of additional fighter jets and Navy warships to the Middle East was announced earlier this month, as Washington seeks to bolster defences following threats from Iran and its allies Hamas and Hezbollah. Meanwhile, leaders of UK, France and Germany have renewed calls for the immediate resumption of ceasefire negotiations, saying the fighting must end and all hostages must be released. The latest push for a truce follows the killing of Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh. Fresh talks for a ceasefire deal, Gaza, are slated for this week. Hamas has urged mediators to implement an existing plan presented by President Biden last month and has ruled out new rounds of negotiations. Israel said it will send a team of negotiators to take part. But earlier I spoke to our correspondent, Barbara Plett-Usher.
We had that statement by the United States and the 2 regional negotiators, Qatar and Egypt, last week at a very high level. The presidents of Egypt and the United States signed it, and also the Emir of Kuwait, of Qatar. So clearly making this a very intense push towards trying again to get a ceasefire deal. The Americans and the negotiators believe that this is the best way to try to calm regional tensions by actually getting a ceasefire deal. So they said, you know, the framework has been on the table. This is the framework that President Biden mentioned at the end of May. It's been on the table for a while. There are differences of opinion about how to implement it. We're prepared to offer a bridging proposal so we can actually get this done. There's been a lot of pressure on both sides to try to come to a deal. The Israelis, as you said, according to press reports here, have said they would send negotiators. Hamas had been silent up until this point, but recently did issue a statement. It said that the talks should resume from where they left off. There shouldn't be any new proposals. It said that Israel should be made to accept the deal on the table, that Israel had added new conditions at the last round, and that Hamas didn't want endless rounds, new or new proposals to draw things out, because it said this was giving cover for Israel to continue its attacks against Palestinians in Gaza. So it was a sort of statement where they did not rule out participating. I mean, it seemed they accepted in principle to participate, despite the recent assassination of their political leader, Ismail Haniyeh. But they've added conditions to it, and I think they are going to be waiting to see what is actually on the table when those talks get underway on Thursday.
The day you get your Clear Choice dental implants changes your struggle with missing teeth forever. It changes how you eat, how you feel, and how you enjoy life. It changes your smile and how other.
All right, I want to transition to what's going on in Russia right now and Ukraine.
Authorities in Russia have widened
Before we
evacuation
do
orders
that-
in.
Before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lozenges that I have. The cold season's coming in September, and you need to be prepared, trust me. So get the blueberry drops in 100 count. I also have the honey and lemon drops in 100 count, and the elderberry zinc lozenges in a 21 count. The lozenges are larger than the drops, but you should have a couple bags or a few bags of this for your household. The moment you start feeling a little sensation in your throat, you know what? You should take these. You'll create a secretion. It'll neutralize the pathogen, and it'll maintain that mucosal barrier, increase the chances of you not getting sick. All right. So, but if you let it fester and you don't use, early use, then you're going to potentially get an infection, and it takes longer to heal. So please just get a couple bags for your household. The moment something like this happens with your throat, take them. You'll notice that it clears it pretty quickly. So just take my advice, get a couple bags for your household. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. I also have structural nanosilver soaps of different varieties. This one happens to be the charcoal tea tree. Go to the store and go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver soaps. Neutralizes pathogens, and it's a high quality soap. Way better than Dove and some of the other stuff that you take for washing your body. Structural nanosilver liquids. This one's a 30 ppm. I also have a 35 ppm called Max 35. I also have a 14 ppm called Max 14. So please go to the store, take a teaspoon of this a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle, swallow. It'll maintain the mucosal barrier and neutralize pathogens. For the ones that buy the liquid and you haven't bought applicator set, please get this from my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Just put this liquid, in the container, and you can bring it with you in your bag or whatever. It has a spray, a spritzer, it has a dropper, and a nasal spray. It's really important to take a probiotic. I have a veggie cap version, and I also have a powdered version, right? And the powdered version has a scooper. You just mix it with your food or water, and you take it. I usually take the powdered version, but the veggie cap version is also available for easy use. But take a good probiotic every day. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and improve your gut biome. So with that, let's...
Two border regions as Ukrainian troops press on with a major cross-border incursion. The governor of one district of Belgorod has told residents to relocate, and evacuation orders have expanded in neighboring Kursk. Russia says Ukrainian troops have advanced as much as 30 kilometers across the border. The surprise move, which began in Kursk, marks the largest Ukrainian attack on Russian soil since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began.
Russia's civil defense ministry says 13 people were injured when a Ukrainian missile shot down by Russian air defenses fell on this residential building in Kursk. More than 76,000 people have been evacuated in the Kursk region as Ukrainian troops push further into its territory.
80 people and 16 pieces of equipment arrived. This is not our first operation.
The Russian army claims it hit Ukrainian units in areas up to 30 kilometers inside its territory. It released images of what it says are strikes on a Ukrainian tank in the Kursk region. On the weekend, Kyiv acknowledged the incursion on Russian territory, which began last week.
Today, Commander-in-Chief Zyrski has already reported several times on the frontline situation and on our actions to push the war out into the aggressor's territory. I thank every unit of our defense forces that makes this happen.
In Ukraine, the offensive has provided a boost in morale to the war-weary population, even as many near the Russian border are forced to leave their homes for their own safety.
I don't brag about business tools often, but when I do, I'm probably talking about Navan. Navan automates expenses from swipe to reconciliation. I added our spend policy once, and now our employee.
I feel great, really good. Let them find out what it's like. They don't understand what war is. Let them get a taste of it.
Kyiv, however, has not explained its strategic aim with the incursion into Russia, but Ukraine's attack on the Kursk region draw away attention from other frontline areas where Russia appears to make slow but sustained advances.
Well, Frank Ledwidge is a former UK military intelligence officer who now lectures in strategic studies at Portsmouth University in England. He joins us from Oxford. Welcome back to DW, Frank. What do you think is behind these Ukrainian incursions?
Well, good morning. It does seem now that we're looking at a major incursion of about 5 brigades, so 10 to 15,000 people or elements of 5 brigades. And not only that, but they are well equipped. They're well equipped with the latest Western gear, artillery, rocket systems, and so forth. So this is not a sort of raided force. That's the first thing. So what's the purpose? Well, it seems that the primary purpose, which is succeeding, is to shift the narrative, shift the story, message that Ukraine is capable still, despite being under pressure in the south, of conducting effective offensive operations. So that's at the political level. They're capable still of effective assaults on Russian forces and destabilizing them. And the fact we're talking about this in this way shows that that is succeeding as far as it goes.
Okay. How does it, beyond that, how does it advance anyone's war games? It's, from what you said, it sounds like Ukraine is saying we're still in the game, but the thing is still locked in place.
Yes, and it's very early days to say where this will go. The main operational objective of this, and strategic objective, is to change the political story, change things. We're on the front foot, as Nick said. But at operational level, I suspect one of the purposes, at least, was to attempt to draw not only attention away from the embattled fronts in the south and east, but to draw Russian reinforcements away, to call Russia's bluff, say, look, how much do you really want to defend your territory? At the moment, it seems that the Russians are not fighting with respect to that. They're not pulling forces from other places. There are plenty of reserves within metropolitan Russia itself, not least, by the way, in Army Group North, which is the area of operations of the Russian army that the Ukrainians have smashed into, the headquarters of which is, I understand, in Belgorod. So they're fighting towards Kharkiv, whilst the Ukrainians are fighting effectively towards, although they won't get near, Kursk. So the high likelihood is that if army reinforcements are drawn from elsewhere, it'll be from that front, the Kharkiv front, not the really under pressure southern front. But we'll see. The Russians have made big mistakes before. It would be a big mistake to do that, in my view. Also, just one other thing. It does seem that there are reports that the FSB, the Federal Security Bureau, the old KGB, if you like, have been put in charge of running this operation as an internal security matter. I don't know what the significance of that. We'll find out. But really, this is early days in this week-old operation. And it's too early to say how it will go or how it is.
And can Ukraine sustain this advance towards Belgorod and Kursk?
That's the key question. When will their drive culminate? I think we're there or near there now. That's not necessarily a bad thing. If the Ukrainians outrun their logistics, if they get too far into Russia, if they get bogged down, that will be bad news. I suspect that they planned this really well. They don't want a repeat of the counteroffensive last year. We're talking about half the forces deployed in this attack as were deployed last year, but they'll be far better prepared for this plan, and planning will be far more realistic. So I suspect they're unlikely to get bogged down. One option, of course, is just to come right out again if things get troublesome and the narrative shifts. We don't know, but the one thing I have to avoid is running beyond the logistics, because people invading Russia doing that find that it doesn't end well.
And as Ukraine invades Russia, can you see Russia escalating this from this so-called special military operation into an actual war?
I can't see them needing to do that. First of all, that would buy into the Ukrainian narrative. But secondly, they don't need to. They've got no problems at the moment with manpower. They're getting volunteers in. Ukraine does have problems with manpower, and I suspect there are certain views being expressed in the south and east of the country where troops are under pressure as to why it is those five rather better brigades of the army have been deployed into Russia, and they could be perhaps more usefully deployed to the south. So no, the Russians, I don't see them changing that, but that's Putin's decision, and I can't nor can anyone else look inside his head. We're buying the Ukrainian narrative, effectively.
Fascinating analysis, Frank, and we thank you for it. Military analyst Frank Ledwidge.
My pleasure, thank you.
Our correspondent in Kyiv, Nick Connolly, joins us. Nick, bring us up to date on the Ukrainian offensive into Russia.
Look, I think we were all expecting that almost a week in we would have a better handle on what exactly is going on in Kursk region, but it seems more or less to be the opposite situation. We've had a clampdown from Russian authorities on civilians posting stuff on social media, so those videos we had in the first few days of destroyed Russian army kind of convoys, those have stopped. Similar situation with so-called military bloggers, these bloggers who are close to the Russian military, who were pretty, kind of panicked and beating the drum that the Russian government wasn't taking this seriously the first few days. They have quietened down and fallen into line. And the Ukrainian side is keeping very tight-lipped. When we do get stuff posted by Ukrainian soldiers, it often seems to be a couple of days out of date. But it does still seem to be the case that Ukrainian forces are about 30 kilometers deep into Russia in the Kursk region. We've had reports of incursions at other places along the border in Belgorod region and in other parts of Kursk region. And there is a sense that Ukraine is on a roll. We've had reports by analysts saying that Russia had built defenses in this part of its border with Ukraine, but that it's just weren't enough boots on the ground and enough munitions and other equipment there to actually make those defenses work. So basically, once the Ukrainian soldiers had passed those first defensive lines, they could basically take as much territory as they wanted and didn't really find much in the way of Russian soldiers. And if there were there, they were most likely conscripts, people in their early 20s with no fighting experience from the front lines, who weren't able to put up much of a fight.
And this is the biggest Ukrainian incursion of its type in this war. What could it achieve?
Well, President Zelensky has kept very quiet. He hasn't given any kind of broader aims to this. He's just talked about basically giving Russia a taste of its own medicine. I think they are very conscious of the fact that they put too high expectations on the counteroffensive last year, and they were basically trailing it for months before it actually happened, and then were unable to meet expectations. This time, I think it's pretty opportunistic, just seeing how much territory they can take. Obviously, this is great for morale in Ukraine after months of bad news. It's also very bad for morale in Russia. Obviously, Vladimir Putin basically unable to secure his own country's borders, let alone take control of Ukraine. So that is a win for Ukraine. Also internationally, it shows Western countries maybe thought that Ukraine was basically running out of steam, but there is still a resource kind of base there. I think they're also hoping to force the Russians to take troops away from the front lines in the east of Ukraine, Donetsk region, where the Russians have been really pushing forward. We've had reports that Russia is having to move its planes, its aviation, that has been crucial to its advantage on the ground, to Kursk region. And there are now increasing reports of soldiers being moved from the kind of less high priority parts of front lines in Ukraine, not yet from places like Pokrovsk or Chasiv Yar. Obviously, this will take time. That's not something that happens within a couple of days, but the hope is that this could really allow Ukrainian troops in the east that have been suffering to basically have a break and to have less of a Russian supremacy kind of opposite them. And potentially that's been the suspicion that this could also be some kind of swap in future, that Ukraine takes territory in Russia to then offer as a trade for Russia-occupied Ukraine. All of these things are still speculative, but for now, I think given the kind of seemingly relatively small investment in terms of resources and manpower, I think this is going better than most Ukrainian observers would have expected just a few days ago.
Nick Connolly in Kyiv, thank you very much for the analysis.
So now what I want to do is I'm going to go over here and get an idea. All right, this is the Israeli news 48 minutes ago.
Welcome to our latest weekly edition of Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute, during the course of which we aim to focus and deliberate on all major events currently taking place in the Middle East, the implications directed, of course, also by decision makers in Washington and Europe, as well as particularly now at a time when heightened tensions are reigning between the Islamic Republic of Iran, its proxies, and the State of Israel. To do just that, let's now turn to my colleague in Washington, D.C., namely Dr. Mike Duran, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute. Good to see Mike.
Great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you.
I'd like to start my first question, which will be somewhat longer than usual, but nonetheless important to highlight. In the latest edition of the publication of Foreign Affairs for the month of August, the former Deputy National Security Advisor of the Obama administration, namely Ben Rhodes, who is also very close to the current reigning National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, wrote the following: over the last 2 decades, American lectures on democracy have increasingly been turned out. Indeed, after Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel and the Israeli military campaign in Gaza, American rhetoric about the rules-based international order has been seen around the world on a split screen of hypocrisy, as Washington has supplied the Israeli government with weapons used to bomb Palestinian civilians with impunity, he claims. The war has created a policy challenge for an administration that criticizes Russia for the same indiscriminate tactics that Israel has used in Gaza, a political challenge for a Democratic Party with core constituencies who don't understand why the president has supported a far-right government that ignores the United States advice, and a moral crisis for a country whose foreign policy purports to be driven by universal values. He puts it down simply: Gaza should shock Washington out of the muscle memory that guides too many of its actions. I'm baffled, Mike. I mean, he goes against all the most high authorities when we're talking about modern warfare, urban warfare, particularly speaking about, of course, John Spencer, who is the chair of the Urban Warfare Program at the War Institute at West Point in the United States, who said the following: Israel has implemented more precautions to prevent civilian harm than any military in history and beyond what international law requires, something echoed by no other than Lord Andrew Roberts, who said matters in the same line of thought. What am I missing here, and how does such an influential individual come to adopt the narrative spouted by no other than the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates around the world?
Well, Jonathan, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I actually have a superpower. I have just one, and that is that I understand what's in the mind of progressives about the Middle East. And the reason for that is that I spent many hours, too many, in graduate seminars in the Ivy League, listening to them talk about this. And this is where all this thinking comes from. It starts, by the way, as domestic political thinking. The progressive, this is what Ben Rhodes is. Ben Rhodes, we can actually assume that what Ben Rhodes is saying is what Obama wants him to say. I think that's a safe assumption. They're tied at the hip. And Ben Rhodes is a spokesperson for Obama and for his wing of the party, of the Democratic Party. Their view of the Middle East begins as a domestic American political view. There is the progressive wing of the party, which is the most dynamic wing of the party, has created an image of the Middle East that sees all of the problems in the Middle East as the result of the domestic enemies of the progressives. That's evangelical Christians, security-minded Republicans. They form a coalition together with Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud and Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. That's the party of war. And the progressives see themselves as the party of peace and they see Iran not as the agent of peace, but as the target of the party of peace. So they want to target in the sense of diplomatic target. They want to have engagement of Iran and restrictions on Israel. Israel and Saudi Arabia, in their worldview, are acting as a catapult that is throwing the United States into a needless conflict with Iran. So if we just restrain Israel, then we can bring about peace in the Middle East, because we can unlock this area that you, Jonathan, you don't know it exists, but this is the area of overlapping interest between the Iranians and the Americans. We can find that if we will just keep our allies, the Saudis and the Israelis, from throwing us into this conflict with Iran. It doesn't work, this worldview. It is crashing right now. This has basically been, in many ways, the policy of the Biden administration. The Biden administration told Israel not to go in on the ground in Gaza, not to go into Gaza City, not to go into Han Yunis, not to go into Rafah, and so on. And it believed in doing that it would show Tehran and also Sinwar that they could find a negotiated solution through American mediation. What they did is they incentivized the aggression of the Iranians and of Sinwar, and that is the essential problem. We can restrain Israel to a significant extent, but we can never get the other side to accept the existence of Israel.
Indeed. Well, let's now turn elsewhere here in Israel to the former Mossad intelligence directorate-chief and also a senior member of the IDF intelligence directorate, among others, no other than Brigadier General in Reserve, Amnon Sofi. It's good to see you, General. It's great to have you here. I would love to hear what you have to say about that, but actually, rather than spending more time on this point, I'd like to actually focus on the state of affairs when we're talking about ongoing negotiations, which the United States is trying to push right now for in the Gaza Strip. The Qataris and the Egyptians are heavily involved in this, but Hamas does not seem to be on board. What can you tell us about that?
First of all, the fact that Yahya Sinwar was chosen to be the political leader of Hamas, or the head of what we call the political wing of Hamas, made him the most powerful man within this movement. And he is the only one who makes the decisions. And it's up to him to decide whether he joins these negotiations or not. Now, there are a lot of rumors spread around, people telling that Yahya Sinwar just waved the white flag and he is willing to give in, and he wants to get a ceasefire immediately because it's almost crashing, which is not really true. He is, of course, under pressure and his units are under pressure, but nevertheless, Hamas is not terminated anymore, not yet. And it will take a lot of time, if in all, until we can complete this mission. So first of all, he holds all the cards now in his hand, meaning the political one. He doesn't have to consult anyone. He makes his own decisions. And now he plays chicken. He's sitting in his tunnel elsewhere in Gaza or under, nobody knows exactly where, of course, surrounded with hostages. He knows that there are, part of them are very close to him and the others are spread around. And he's holding the stick in his hand, and now he says, okay, you want to go on negotiating? Great. But you'll do it on my terms, and I will dictate exactly what I want to be implied. First of all, I want you to leave what we call the Submarine corridor. We separate the northern part of Gaza to the central and southern part of Gaza, meaning where the Israelis are now, the IDF is now holding the whole area from east to west, and actually separating the northern part of Gaza from the other part of it, and doesn't allow people to get back home. And they control anyone who tries to get into or out from the northern part of Gaza. Second, they want us to leave what we call the Philadelphia corridor, which separate between Gaza and the Egyptian border, where all the tunnels, the smuggling towers from Sinai Peninsula into Gaza are beneath this corridor. And he said, first of all, imply these terms and stop fighting, and only then I will be willing to negotiate. Now, the fact that you are gathering in Doha or elsewhere doesn't force me to get in or to join this negotiations. I'm not willing to play the game, and I'll play it according to my own terms.
Thank you, General Sofrin. Let's now turn elsewhere in Israel, where we're joined by another Brigadier General in the reserve, maybe at one
Before we do that, let me do a commercial here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorants that we have that are all natural, made from essential oils from the Himalayas. This is citrus. This one over here is peppermint lavender tea tree. They're made from essential oils from the Himalayas, no aluminum, no baking soda. Use it every day. It's for males and females, and there's a dual purpose with this deodorant bar. It helps to detoxify your body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorant bars that I offer. They're very high quality. Get a couple bars for your household. In addition, Rainbow Herbals and I developed this Even Better bar. This is a multi-purpose bar. It's a multi-purpose skincare bar. You can apply it on your skin every day. You'll notice that your skin's smoother, a little bit shinier, and softer. In addition, you can put it on a wound. It'll help to heal the wound, like an abrasion or a minor burn, quicker. It'll help to heal it quicker. And it'll help to alleviate psoriasis and eczema. If you have a bug bite and you want to stop the itch, rub this on the bug bite. It'll stop the itch in about 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds. Same thing with a muscle pain. You can alleviate the muscle pain within 30 or 60 seconds. So try this out. It's a very high quality, all-purpose skin bar. So go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Even Better bar. It's really important to get vitamin D3. That's important. Why? Because it absorbs calcium. It's a gene expression cofactor, and it helps to have cells go into apoptosis when they need to. So that's a really important vitamin that you should be taking every day. To bring down inflammation, take turmeric. You know, you should be taking turmeric every day. Keep that pro-inflammatory cytokine low, because what chronic inflammation does to the body is it weakens the immune system and you age faster. So you want to boost up your immune system and age slower. That's the whole goal. So take turmeric every day. It's also an antioxidant. You couple it with ashwagandha. They're synergistic. Ashwagandha helps to control the blood glucose levels, but it'll also help to bring down the inflammatory response in the vascular system. So that's really important to help to slow down the aging process, reduce cardiovascular disease, and control your blood glucose levels. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Cottrell, Air Force Commander, fighter pilot, and the IDF Chief of Cyber Staff. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to draw our conversation to the broader scheme of things. Of course, we have both Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic of Iran adamant on launching a severe attack, or they utilize different terminologies surrounding the severe, but let's focus on the severe attack against Israel, something that, of course, it is also wary of, since the causality of such an attack may bring about an all-out regional conflagration. What are the messages that Israel is currently sending towards the Iranians, and to what degree are the Iranians really planning something as robust that may bring the entire region into a situation that would potentially also spill over to adjacent neighborhoods?
You know, what we're seeing now is the height of the regional power competition, and the players now, each one is sort of weighing its options, and is it a good point to, to step into a higher position on the ladder, or
which is quite interesting. Is this a moment of sort of self-restraint or self-deterrence? Yeah, I know it sounds like something quite weird, but that's what we're actually seeing. And the reason I'm saying this is that we've mentioned in previous discussions that Iran has actually positioned itself very well in this regional power, and actually on a global stance, it's doing very well. It's joined very well the Russian-Chinese axis on the global arena, and as such, it has achieved a point where everything you do from now on, you may actually lose your position. So, well, now I reach this point that I am respected, well respected, both on the global and the regional arena. So if I do this thing after the killing of the Hamas leader on my ground, yes, it was embarrassing, but should I now really let go of, you know, the place I've earned with so much effort for so many years? So I think that in the point that we are at right now, Hezbollah and Iran are in a very interesting point. They're actually going to show some kind of self-restraint. And the reason is that Hezbollah for Iran is the insurance policy, right? Iran wants the nuclear capability. To get there, it needs to keep Hezbollah. So if I sacrifice Hezbollah too early in the game, I won't reach my nuclear ambitions. So now let's turn to Hezbollah. Hezbollah has two heads. We keep talking about that. It has its Lebanese head and its Iranian master. So if I do what the master says, I'm gonna hurt, or I'm gonna be against the Lebanese state. I'm gonna ruin Lebanon. And look at what's going on in Lebanon. Like what we're seeing today in Lebanon is huge for the Lebanese. I mean, the country is falling apart economically, and for various reasons, the tribes, the various religions. It's a very non-cohesive country with all the different religions and different types. You know, the civilians there are very, very different, come from very different backgrounds and religions. And right now, what everyone is saying to Nasrallah is, look what you're doing. I mean, all of the people in the Dakhia are running away. So Beirut is under huge pressure, the capital of Beirut. People are trying to rent homes outside of that area. And the people from the other neighborhoods are saying, hey, look, we're not in this fight. Why are we paying the price of the rise of rent? The rental prices are going up because of your war with Israel, which we don't care about. So this whole thing of Nasrallah having the Lebanese head and the Iranian master head is actually coming back at Nasrallah and at Iran with everything that I said, and saying, you know what, maybe we will do something, but not too bad. Now, how does not too bad look in the Middle East? And how many unintended consequences will come out of that? Only God knows.
Indeed. Mike, when I'm looking at the broader picture, though, strategically speaking, Hassan Nasrallah in his last address during Fuad Shukur's or Said Mohsen's memorial 1 week into his death said that trying to explain why Hezbollah is actually engaged in the war with Israel in the first place, he highlighted that if Hamas falls in the Gaza Strip, and if Hamas falls in the so-called West Bank, in Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley, that would be a devastating blow to the region. Of course, he refers to the Iranian-led axis. What can we take out of this, and to what degree do decision makers and policy thinkers actually take that into account, considering the fact that all those various sectors are interoperable, but not with Gaza being the root cause of it all, rather the Iranian octopus head that is dictating what its strategy in the region may be?
Well, if we're looking at it from Washington, from the Biden administration's point of view, the Biden administration sees Gaza as the key. They feel that if they can force a ceasefire in Gaza and they can extend the ceasefire, that will lead to a ceasefire in Lebanon, and it will lead to a ceasefire with the Houthis as well. So for them, this is where their thinking is very similar to Ben Rhodes in that regard. They want to restrain the Israelis, prove to Hamas that they can cut a deal for them, but they can't, as General Sofrin said, they can't get the Israelis out of the Philadelphia corridor and out of the Netzarim corridor, and that's what Sinwar needs. He wants a complete Israeli withdrawal so he can say he won, which is simply not going to happen. So the key, if you're looking at it from Tehran sees the key to preventing the loss that General Rosen just talked about of its Tehran's status that it's built. It sees the key as the combined military threat to Israel from Hezbollah, combined with the political restraint on Israel from Washington. So the Iranians are really negotiating with the Americans right now as much as they are trying to deter the Israelis militarily. But we're on a knife's edge. Look, imagine you're Khamenei and you're looking at what just happened in Ukraine. The Ukrainians launched an offensive against the Russians without the permission of the Americans. This is, I think, now established from both in Kiev and Washington. That has got to be disturbing if you're sitting in Tehran and you realize that you make a comparison, you realize the Israelis may make the same calculation. We have a lame duck president, President Biden, whatever he wants, he's not really in a position to impose his will on his allies. And that's scary from the Iranian point of view. On the other hand, the Iranians also have now, where we're just learning, there are hundreds of Russians in Iran right now training on Iranian ballistic missiles so that they can receive them from Iran and use them against the Ukrainians. So Tehran has never been in a better position. In hundreds of years, Iran has never been in a better position with respect to Russia. Russia is dependent on Iran in a way that it never has been before. Now, the Russians, as we know, are extremely good at compartmentalizing. The fact that they need the Russians, they need the Iranians for these ballistic missiles, for the drones, etc., doesn't mean they're necessarily going to support them wholeheartedly in Lebanon. But it is a factor that's working to the advantage of the Iranians. We don't know what the Iranians are asking for in return from the Russians. So the hardest thing for me to do when looking at this picture is to understand how is Khamenei gonna calculate what he's gonna do. I still believe there will be some kind of serious response to the assassinations that Israel carried out. But there's got to be fear in Tehran that the Israelis may just be unleashed, whether America wants them to or not, take out all of their oil exporting capabilities, for example, and seriously hurt them.
Well, with that being said, I'd like to actually ask you, General
It's
Sofrin.
really important to understand that by knocking out the Iranian capability for oil, knocks out the energy that China needs, especially if China decides to move into Taiwan and the United States starts to put pressure and choke points. All right. So keep in mind what's going on in the Middle East is also going to have some sort of knockdown effect, some sort of contagion, some sort of an effect in Asia. All right. So don't think that our military just in the Middle East is just a Middle East play. It's a global play, not a local play. But knocking out Iran, would solve some major problems, especially with this conflict between the Sunnis and the Shias and all this stuff. But it's crazy. I'll tell you, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver gels that I have. These are all-purpose, multi-purpose gels, right? It comes in a dispenser form or in a tube form. You use them the same way. You put it on your hands, they'll neutralize pathogens. You can also put it around your mouth, around your nose, around your eyes, around your ears. You can also lightly coat your nostrils. And that way, it's neutralizing pathogens and maintaining that mucosal barrier in your nostrils. In addition, you can put it on your skin as a skincare, as a daily skincare. Best way to do that would be to put it on before you go to bed and then exfoliate at night. What you'll notice is your skin's clearer and tighter, especially around your face. You can put it on a wound. So if you put it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, it will heal quicker by about a third, by about 33% of it quicker. So please go to the store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver gel in the tube form or in the dispenser form. I sell the best toothpaste that you can buy. All right, it'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize pathogens because it has structural nanosilver in it. It has no fluoride. Fluoride's bad for you. Make sure you filter your water. Get that fluoride out and get the PFAs out and get the microplastics out and all that. But it's really important to make sure that you get this toothpaste. It's the best toothpaste you can get. It'll neutralize pathogens. It'll improve your oral hygiene, reduce gum irritation. Your plaque will reduce. And by doing this every day, you're going to have better oral hygiene. When you have better oral hygiene, you're going to have better cardiovascular function. You're going to reduce cardiovascular disease, and you're going to reduce valvular disease. A lot of people don't realize that part of the problem with cardiovascular disease is poor oral hygiene. All right, so it's really important. So go to my store, get a few of these tubes of toothpaste. It's very high quality toothpaste. It's the best that you're going to get. I sell a toothpaste that's way better than anything that Alex Jones sells. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support my work. A lot's going on in the world, and some people can't sleep very well. I have a supplement that will allow you to sleep and get 3 cycles of REM sleep, get deeper sleep. You need REM cycle sleep and deep sleep to be well rested, to detoxify your body, and to consolidate memory. If you're chronically deprived of sleep, your body's going to age faster, you're going to build up toxins, and you're going to have memory loss. So it's really important to make sure that you take the Good Night formula and take it every day if you're having a problem sleeping. And that way you're getting that good rest, and you're going to start noticing that your body is healing and your body is detoxifying and you're having better memory and energy. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And vitamin C, really important for the skin, but also for your immune system. Take this every day. During the cold season, if you're not feeling well, take a double dose of it. And lastly, olive leaf extract. It's a new product on my store. This is a dual purpose product. It will bring down cardiovascular disease, and it'll also improve your immune system. All right. So how does that work? All right. Olive leaf extract will bring down inflammation. And by bringing down inflammation, your immune system is going to be better. Okay. But not just does it bring down inflammation, it'll bring down inflammation in the vascular system. So by bringing down inflammation in the vascular system, you're reducing cardiovascular disease. And it'll help with bringing down LDL levels and bring up your HDL levels. So people build up plaque because of inflammation in the vascular system, too high of a lipid profile, they have too high of an LDL count. And what happens is that there's a little bit of irritation in the lining of your vessel. There may be a little bit of a tear and an accumulation of LDL, and your macrophages will come up and eat up this LDL, oxidized LDL, and build a plaque. Well, if you don't have inflammation in your vascular system, you will have a healthier lining inside of your vascular system. And if you bring down your LDL levels, you're going to have less LDL, oxidized LDL, and therefore you're going to have less macrophages eating up LDL, called foam cells. And when you take something like this and bring down inflammation and control your LDL levels, you are improving your vascular system and you're reducing the chances of vascular disease. So it's really important to if you take my advice, you listen to me, and you do this every day, you are going to see huge benefits of major organ systems, cardiac systems, neural systems, hepatic, kidney, renal, endocrine systems. You're gonna start noticing your body is healing. All right. So go to my store, take my advice, go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. It's gonna boost up your immune system and it's gonna improve your lipid profile. That means that it's gonna improve your cardiovascular health. Can Alex Jones really tell you all this? Does Alex Jones even understand all these mechanisms and how plaque builds up in your arteries? Probably not.
Sitting in Tehran and seeing the assets that the United States has deployed in the region, including 2 U.S. aircraft carrier strike groups, including 2 entire wings of F-22 Raptors, including B-2s, none of which are defensive weaponry to begin with. And therefore, what goes through the Iranian mind when you see all those offensive assets being deployed in the region at a time when, on the one hand, Pentagon releases repeated statements saying that everything is defensive, but at the same time it says it's also there to deter?
First of all, it is deterring. I believe it has a deterring effect on the Iranian mind. But nevertheless, I don't believe that the Iranians gave up and waved the white flag and say, okay, we give up and we're not going to do anything. Because their own, what we call national dignity, was being damaged badly by this assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran at a very captive house regarded by the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, which is the most powerful organization within this establishment. And therefore, somebody, and of course Israel is the first one to be blamed on, somebody executed this operation on the Iranian soil and actually damaged the national dignity, and they have to pay back. Now, the fact that they crossed the Rubicon on April 14th gives them the ability to react in a way that will be some kind of restraint. I mean that they're going to do something that will not try to drag the Israelis into a larger war and to cause the Israelis to react very badly on either oil assets or the nuclear sites in Iran that can, of course, be attacked by Israel if needed. But when you look at what the Iranians are, the way the Iranians are acting on the last 2 weeks, they acquired from, or they received from the Russians anti-aircraft batteries. They received new anti-aircraft batteries, as I said, and missiles, probably, and some other assets. And they are now organizing their defensive capabilities against any Israeli attempt to strike back if and when they are going to react. And of course, are deterred somehow because of the American presence, especially the S-22 and the B-1 bomber that can be applied and can be activated against
So
them.
we easily beat Crooked Joe?
General Wazen, you have roughly 2 minutes. Strategically speaking, how should Israel think? Take us out of the box.
One thing I think is to maximize the double-edged sword that Iran's strategy, long-standing strategy of proxy war and actually embedding military capabilities in civilian infrastructure. We need to maximize that, and I think that in a sense, Gaza is an example now to Nasrallah. So when you embed 150,000 missiles in all of your own villages, the Shiite villages, 250 villages roughly, south of Beirut, when you arm these villages with rockets, they will be destroyed. And when Israel says, when the Minister of Defense, Gallant, says that we are ready, that is what he means. That is what he means. And now, looking at Gaza and how it looks like after 10 months of war, I think this is a credible threat that in Nasrallah's mind, it is playing the self-deterrent or the self. It's containing Nasrallah. He's being restrained from acting. And so raising that on one hand and changing now the equation, namely and specifically in the south of Lebanon, to enable the civilians to go back home in the north of Israel, because Israel was de facto the sovereignty of Israel for the most of the north, which is, for such a small country, it's about a sixth or a fifth of Israel's most beautiful area. It has been conquered by fire, not by invasion, but it's the same. The effect is the same. So I think that in that sense, we are about to see what comes out of these two positions that Israel is taking and Nasrallah is taking vis-a-vis the retaliation to the assassinations.
Dr. Duran, final sentence is yours.
So if I sum it all up, we got three scenarios. Either the two sides restrain themselves and it doesn't explode. We go or the Iranians restrain themselves and Hezbollah restrains themselves, or we have a limited conflict. Let's say the Iranians and Hezbollah target simultaneously one Israeli military base, has a big CNN effect, but doesn't really trigger a massive response by Israel. Or we have all-out war. The problem with the second scenario is that it can very quickly become all-out war. The one last thing that we have to think about is that on Thursday there's supposedly going to be a negotiation about Gaza, about reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas said yesterday that it's not interested, but that could just be a negotiating position. This could be one area where they could climb down if they want to. But if I have to bet, I think we're going to see some kind of conflict.
Thank you, Mike. Well, this is all the time that we have for today.
I think there is going to be more conflict, but where his analysis fails is that he didn't bring up what the strategic mindset that might change by the United States if we see advancement of China on Taiwan. Because we would want to choke their oil shipments. That means that we would knock out their oil facilities and control heavily what is moving in the Gulf for shipping. So naval presence would be even more aggressive by the United States. He didn't bring any of that up. I mean, he's from Harvard, or he's from the Hudson Institute, right? I mean, this is what I'm saying, that people are not paying attention. These are not separate wars. These are connected. These are connected. And that's when you understand, when you realize, when you zoom out and you realize that there's things that are connected. And if you only zoom into one region and only, you know, some of the variables that are dealing with that region, then you get clipped, and something happens in another region that totally radically changes the dynamics of the region you're so myopically focused on. I mean, I learned this in finance. You can't just look at the equity market when you have the, let's say, the commercial paper market having problems, or loan provisions for, you know, bad loans are starting to build up on a balance sheet. Just, there are other systems that take place that have a knockdown effect on other systems. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to do live now from Fox. But before I do live now from Fox, that Bloomberg did have a little mention about what just happened with the Lincoln.
We need stories. We need stories to understand ourselves. We're the only creature that does this on
Israel right now is strengthening its infrastructure.
Before I do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. It's a very good product. It's part of my anti-aging protocol. I take it every day. Gets rid of senescent cells. It's an antioxidant, and the key here is it's synergistic with some of the other things that I tell you to take, like bringing down the inflammation, like the turmerics and the ashwagandhas, but the C60, which is a very strong antioxidant. So please go to the store and get the resveratrol. I take this every day. It's part of the anti-aging protocol, and it also helps to boost up your mitochondrial health. Clarity factor. This gets rid of that brain fog. This is way better than anything that Alex Jones sells. All right, so please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. This will keep that neuroplasticity connected. You'll have those neurons firing by having good connections, and neurons are firing, and your ATP is going up because you're improving your mitochondrial health by taking the C60s and the resveratrols and all this stuff. They all work together to maintain neural health. So please go to my store, maintain your neural health. It's really important. It'll also allow you to concentrate at work or in school. So go to my store and get the clarity factor.
As it faces heightened risk of attacks from Iran or its proxies in the Middle East. This comes as Iran reiterates its pledge to seek revenge for the killing of a top Hamas official in Tehran. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Bobby Ghosh, and we are just getting the latest from the Wall Street Journal saying that the U.S. planning to send a carrier and a missile submarine to the Middle East in preparation for the retaliation from Iran. Can you just give us a...
My understanding is the carrier strike group. It's not just the Abraham Lincoln.
Framework for what we're expecting in terms of what the retaliation might look like?
Well, so Iran keeps saying it will retaliate, and there was a statement overnight from the Iranian foreign minister to that effect again. Iran knows that it can't keep making these statements without actually doing something, because that undermines its credibility at home and with all its proxy militias in the region. It set a bar. Iran set a bar last April when the Israelis took out a senior Iranian commander in Syria. Iran responded for the first time by retaliating from Iranian soil. Remember, they fired off 300 missiles and drones in the direction of Israel. It was a bit of a showpiece. They gave Israel plenty of time to prepare. They gave plenty of advance warning, so no actual damage was done, but it was symbolic. But it set a bar. Now the challenge for Iran is calibration. It has to raise the bar. It can't not. This is Israel taking out an important target in Tehran. But at the same time, it has to calibrate to in a way that it doesn't set off a war. Iran does not want a war. None of these players want an actual all-out war, because the damage from that is far too great. Their economies won't sustain it. So how do you raise the bar without actually getting into a war? The most likely scenario, and all kinds of defense experts are sort of looking out for this, which is that Iran fires off another volley of missiles, maybe more than last time, more than 300 from Iranian territory, simultaneously has its proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hashd in Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen all also fire off a volley of missiles and drones and rockets. So it's a much larger number of it's a much larger aerial attack coming from multiple sides. The challenge then for Israel is, does the Iron Dome, the famous Iron Dome, is it capable of taking this multi-pronged hundreds of missiles from all over the place? One. And then the second challenge is for Israel's allies, especially the United States, can we then restrain Israel from going up one more notch? That's the risk. The risk here is not that any of the parties want a war. The risk is that we've reached a stage where any of the parties all too easily and unwittingly can blunder into a war. That's the real risk, that something will happen that pushes everyone over the edge.
We're already in a war. I mean, make a mistake and be in a war. No, they're already in a war. The question is will it become more kinetic? I'll tell you, these, it's unbelievable. Some of these people are dumb. All right, I'm going to go to President Trump's advertising.
The worst president in the history of our country, and he's the worst because of his policy and other reasons, but because of policy. And now they decided they don't want to go with him, so they stage a coup. That's all it was, is a coup. It should have never been allowed, actually. And we have Kamala. We're going to have Kamala instead. They put in another fighter. The first one failed, and the second one was going to fail also because she wants open borders and she wants no Merry Christmas even. I just heard today she's a big fan of fighting no Merry Christmas. No, we're going to have Merry Christmas just like we got for everybody 7 years ago. We brought it back. It was in deep trouble. We brought it back. But we're going to bring back all of our common sense things. And you look at the fighters now in the Olympics, how horrible that is. I say there will not be men in women's sports. And that's really probably been our best advertisement of why it shouldn't happen. It's ridiculous. It's insane. But between open borders and to fund the police and all of the things that she stands for, we're going to fight very, very hard. Whatever you can do to help, because they have a lot of money. They don't have good policy. They don't have good people. They go after their political opponent with the Justice Department. Never happened in this country before. But whatever you can do, do it. If you can't afford it, please don't do it. But if you can afford, we have to win this. We're going to take back our country. We're going to make America great again. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Just moments ago, the Israel Defense Forces is sharing this post on their social media platform saying, quote, so far there have been a confirmed 31 terrorists eliminated in the strike on the Hamas stronghold in the school where terrorists plan to execute attacks against Israel. Now, the airstrike that hit a school turned shelter in Gaza, that happened early Saturday. It killed at least 80 people, wounding nearly 50 others. That is according to Palestinian health authorities, one of the deadliest attacks of the 10-month Israel-Hamas war. Israel, though, saying that it targeted a militant command post, killing 19 fighters. This is a post that they posted just moments ago. Of course, this also comes as we continue to follow even more breaking news as U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has ordered a guided missile submarine to the Middle East and is telling the USS Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Strike Group to sail more quickly to that area. That is according to the Defense Department. Officials have been on the lookout for retaliatory strikes by both Iran and Hezbollah for the killings of leaders of both Hamas as well as Hezbollah. And the U.S. has been beefing up its presence in the region. Major General Pat Ryder, the Pentagon press secretary, saying that in a statement that Austin spoke with Israeli Defense Minister Gallant earlier in the day on Sunday, reiterating America's commitment. And to talk more on this breaking news, I do want to bring in John Hanna, who is a JINSA senior fellow, as well as the former national security advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. John, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate it.
Sure, thanks so much for having me.
The United States being very strategic, sending a very clear message with the missile submarine heading to the Middle East as Israel does anticipate retaliation by Iran. From your perspective, from your expertise, what is the message that the United States is sending?
Well, it's a really important message because we've known at least since last April that the United States is committed to defending Israel when it comes under massive attack from its worst and most dangerous enemies in Iran and Hezbollah and the Iranian-backed Axis in the Middle East. But sending a guided missile submarine with 150 Tomahawk missiles, they have no purpose in a defensive operation of Israel. They are only there for offense, to commit massive damage against Iranian and Hezbollah targets if they are foolish enough to overreach and try and inflict some kind of massive damage either on Israel, on America's Arab allies in the Middle East, and importantly, it's important that listeners understand there are thousands of American troops and American citizens deployed in the Middle East in harm's way that are under threat from Iranian-backed militias around the region. And if those troops or American citizens are injured or harmed, having an offensive platform like the USS Georgia submarine that's ready to respond at a moment's notice with this massive firepower to wreak awful destruction on critical Iranian targets and command and control centers. That's a very important and powerful deterrent message.
As you mentioned, the Iran struck back in April, and it was largely a failed attempt. Now they have vowed revenge, especially given the fact that some of the top political leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah have been assassinated. Given this latest message that the United States is sending, because there have been reports that Iran has been expected to attack in the coming days, does that change Iran's strategy? And there has been that balancing in that they want to send a message, but don't necessarily.
Now, do you understand why kicking the can down the road years ago was a bad idea?
Really want to create a larger conflict in which perhaps the international community would then participate.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that the Iranians and Hezbollah are in a bit of a dilemma. Clearly, after those assassination attempts, both in Tehran and in Beirut, their leadership immediately came out and said there would be large-scale retaliation and punishment against Israel for those assassinations. And yet over the following weeks, as we've seen the United States and Israel completely aligned with the American CENTCOM commander in the Middle East traveling to Israel already twice. We are fully coordinated both in the defense of Israel and in messaging to Iran and Hezbollah that if they overreach, if they try to inflict large-scale civilian casualties inside of Israel to attack and kill American troops, that they are facing literally the wrath of God in terms of the kind of firepower and damage that can be done to them that would make any effort by them to retaliate just not worth it. It would put so many of their assets and even in Iran, the regime potentially at risk. that they're now in this dilemma of having committed and yet clearly not wanting to have to face a fight up the escalation ladder with not only Israel, with its tremendous air force and missile force, but also the United States of America. So they're trying to thread this needle very carefully of saving face, saving honor, and yet not getting themselves into a war that they are bound to lose.
And let's talk about that, because there is a lot of concern as to whether this regional conflict may expand. And we have seen Iran strengthen its ties with Russia and perhaps some of the other countries. In your experience, from your perspective, is that a possibility that this could escalate into perhaps a global conflict, especially when you see those strengthening of the ties between countries like Russia and Iran?
There's no doubt that the strengthening alliance between Iran and America's peer competitors, both in Moscow and Beijing, but also let's remember in a nuclear-armed North Korea as well, those are a tremendous long-term concern in terms of the kinds of synergies and help that they could mutually give each other. But in the short term, if the balloon of war was to go up in the Middle East and Iran was to come under massive attack by Israel, the United States, both together, I don't think there's any real probability that Moscow or Beijing are going to risk their own assets on behalf of an Iranian regime that gets itself into a mess in the short term in the Middle East, in part because I just don't think either of those countries has the capability to actually project power in the short term in the same way that
they are going to try to find a way to make sure they get oil, because they know Iran and Russia are key energy providers to China. That's why I'm saying that what's happening in the Middle East is tied to Asia. I'm waiting for this guy to state that, but of course everyone's siloed.
The States does, especially with the Russians being in the mess that they're in with Ukraine currently. So I think the actual prospects for Russia and China getting into a fight against the United States and turning this into World War III is actually not something that we have to take terribly seriously.
Going back to the anticipated attack by Iran, we have been waiting. Israel has been waiting. Really, the world has been waiting. Do you anticipate that being sooner rather than later? Or do you think now they're trying to recalibrate their strategy? As you said, they're trying to thread that needle, especially given the very powerful message that the United States is now sending by sending that missile submarine.
It's hard to know. There's a lot of factors and variables at play here that we don't have a lot of insight on. There is some level of bickering going on clearly within the Iranian regime itself. We've got these ceasefire talks that are coming up on Thursday with respect to Gaza. That could be a make or break moment in which Hamas might get a breather and be allowed to live at least another 6 weeks. And the Iranians and Hezbollah might have an interest in that, so they might delay their attack past that. And as we've said, they've got a lot of their own calculations about what do they do in this circumstance where they feel they need to strike back, and yet now are deathly worried that the United States and Israel have got their act together and have got a plan to retaliate in force on a large scale against critical targets inside of Iran. So it's hard to make predictions. I've been saying all along that it would come sooner rather than later, and I still expect we could get something this week. But if it doesn't, I also wouldn't necessarily be shocked or surprised.
And you did mention the ceasefire negotiations as a possibility for them holding off, perhaps. And I wanted to talk to you about that because Israel has said, yes, were willing to come to the table, and now Hamas is indicating that perhaps they aren't. We have seen these negotiations fall apart time and time again, but with this added pressure, do you think that there is a greater chance of a deal being agreed upon?
Well, it certainly looks like that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, the mediators, are trying to create a sense of inevitability of a make or break moment where if things don't come together on Thursday, they're prepared to go public against whoever the party or parties are that are blocking a deal that they believe should be ready and available and set to be implemented. So it does feel like we're coming up to a critical moment here in these negotiations. Of course, for Hamas's perspective, they've been hoping since October 7th that their action against Israel would have generated or triggered this all-out regional war. So if they still have a hope that the Iranians and Hezbollah might take action here that does trigger that larger war, they may have some interest in holding off. On the other hand, they're under a lot of pressure in Gaza, as you opened the program with. They just had another slew of between 30 and 40 senior terrorists killed in this command center in southern Gaza. So they're under a lot of pressure. They do need a breather. If their allies in Iran and Hezbollah aren't going to really come in and turn this into a large-scale regional war, they eventually may come around to buying themselves another 6 weeks of survival in those tunnels.
John, before we let you go, is there anything else that you would like to share with our Live Now from Fox viewers?
No, other than I would say there's no guarantees we can avoid a large-scale conflagration here, but I think the last 2 weeks has demonstrated and should demonstrate for an American audience just how critical it is that there be as little daylight as possible between the United States and Israel, that whatever frustrations the United States has with Israel, when we come in behind Israel against its enemies and against our enemies in the Middle East, we have a better shot of deterring large-scale war, of making sure our enemies don't overreach, and in bolstering stability and security in this part of the world. And if they believe the United States is not going to come to the assistance of our best and only democratic ally in the Middle East, Israel, it's an important lesson. I hope it works to avoid war. There's no guarantee of that, but it's the best shot we've got for the United States and Israel to have no daylight between us.
All right, John Hanna, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. We appreciate
State
it.
Department briefing here. Supposedly it started. Oh, it started already. Where is it? Oh, there it is.
I have one very brief thing at the top, and I'll also note that I have a bit of a hard out, so I'll be keeping an eye on the clock, and I will need to wrap when I need to wrap, and if I don't get to you, I'm sorry. So first, we are deeply concerned by reports that Iran is planning to deliver hundreds of ballistic missiles to Russia, and we continue to communicate with our European partners and allies regarding potential measures we may take. We've been warning of the deepening security partnership between Russia and Iran since the onset of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This partnership threatens European security and illustrates how Iran's destabilizing influence reaches beyond the Middle East and around the world. As we and our partners have made clear, both at the G7 and at the NATO summit this summer, together we are prepared to deliver a swift and severe response if Iran were to move forward with the transfer of ballistic missiles, which would, in our view, represent a dramatic escalation in Iran's support for Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Iranian officials also continue to deny providing any UAVs to Russia when evidence is plain for the world to see. Russia has used these UAVs in relentless attacks against the civilian population in Ukraine, against civilian infrastructure, and this duplicity is only the latest reminder to the international community that the Iranian regime lacks in credibility. During his campaign, Iranian President Pezeshkian claimed he wanted to moderate Iran's policies and engage with the world, and we have said we have no expectation his election will lead to a fundamental change in Iran's direction. And this pending transfer of missiles, if reports are accurate, is further evidence or a continuation of Iran's destabilizing behavior. We will continue to judge Iran's leadership by their actions, not their words. With that, Myra or Sean, any of you want to kick us off?
No, it's fine. Thanks, Vedant. So can I ask you what's the latest on US expectation on Iran's response on Israel following Khamenei's killing?
So, look, as should be no surprise to you, Myra, I'm not going to get ahead of assessments or speculate intelligence or operational matters from up here. What I can say is what you've heard President Biden, Secretary Blinken, and others echo from up here before is that we are committed to helping Israel defend itself, and we have put robust military capabilities in the region to do just that. But at the same time, we continue to work diplomatically to prevent any major escalation of this conflict. Those are our goals. As you all have seen, no doubt, the Secretary over the past week or so has been engaged in calls with his counterparts, discussing not just the need to finalize a ceasefire deal, but also continuing to work so that there can be de-escalation. We obviously don't want to see any kind of attack or response happen in the first place.
Do you have any indications recently that your efforts are actually working and there might be a more subdued response from Iran?
I'm just not going to get into intelligence assessments or our operational assessments from up here.
Are the ceasefire talks that you called for August 15, are they still going to go ahead after what Hamas said last night?
So I'm aware of those comments from Hamas, and we fully expect talks to move forward as they should. All negotiators should return to the table and bring this deal to conclusion. It is, in our view, time for Hamas to release the hostages, which, as you all know, include American citizens, and bring relief to the people of Gaza under the deal, which continues to be a lot on the table, and we'll continue to work that with regional partners and allies.
Right. When you say you fully expect the talks to go ahead, if they say they're not taking part, are you going to have the talks without them, or are you trying to bring them on board?
As I said, I will just leave it at the fact that we expect these talks to move forward as they should. I'm not going to.
So will you have it without them?
I'm just not going to speculate beyond that. We've seen reports of those comments from Hamas, and we fully expect these talks to continue to move forward.
And who in U.S. view at the moment, who is the biggest obstacle to achieving the ceasefire and hostage deal?
So I'm not going to color it one way or the other, but let's not forget that it was early last week. The Prime Minister of Israel immediately welcomed this initiative and confirmed that the Israeli team will be there and they'll be prepared to finalize the details of implementing the deal. We also, in coordination, we believe our partners in Egypt and Qatar are emphasizing to Hamas that the onus is on them to agree to a ceasefire. We believe that there has been headway made, but we need to finalize this agreement, continue to close and bridge some gaps. We believe that an agreement is possible, and that's something that we're going to continue to work between the parties.
We consider the release the strike on a story.
Before we go to that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video. And also get the magnesium and zinc on top of all the other vitamins that and supplements that I've been telling you to get to boost up your immune system and slow down the aging process. So magnesium and zinc helps with boosting up your immune system if you're not feeling well because of the cold season. Take a double dose. It's important. Omega-3 helps with your cardiovascular health. It'll lower LDL and increase your HDL levels. So take omega-3 every day. That's very important. Multivitamin. You should be taking a multivitamin. You should, if you haven't been, you should start right now, right? You should be taking a multivitamin. The bare minimum is a multivitamin every day, all right? This one is easy to digest, and you need a multivitamin because the minerals and the vitamins are cofactors for enzymes that allow for certain processes in your cell to happen. So if you don't have those cofactors, then your cells will be running subpar. So you need a multivitamin. As we get older, we need to rely on supplementation of our vitamins and minerals. So please go to my store and get this multivitamin. You should add it to your daily protocol. Vitamin B complex, really important for energy and cellular metabolism. The first 5 B vitamins, B1 through B5, are to help boost up the health of the mitochondria. That's the energy production house for your cells. And you need a lot of mitochondria for your neurons. So please go to my store, get the vitamin B complex as an everyday supplementation. It's really important to boost up your immune system. Take this lignin, take the lignans, it's a powder, mix it with your food, or you can mix it with water. Take it every day. It has a little scooper. Take it every day, and this is going to help boost up your immune system, but it's also going to help with hormonal health. A lot of people don't realize that the food that we eat out, processed or at the restaurant, the water we drink, which is not filtered, ends up hurting our endocrine system, our exocrine system, and our immune system. So first off, filter your water. I use a zero water filtration system. Second, stop eating processed foods and stop eating fast food. And if you can, most restaurants have crappy food anyway. Even if you go to a 5-star restaurant, if you actually analyze the food, it's not that good. Your best bet is to actually cook at home and learn how to cook healthy. That's your best bet, all right? But stay away from processed foods and stay away from fast food because it's going to affect your health. So when you stop that, that poor lifestyle choice and you do proper supplementation, then you're going to start seeing your body's healing and your immune system is boosting up and you're slowing down your aging process. You have less aches and pains and you have less problems and you actually feel that you have more energies. So part of this journey is to take lignans. It's going to help to boost up your immune system. It's very important, especially since we went through the 2020 crisis. The 2020 crisis led to an aftershock where people's immune systems are damaged. And we need to help build it back up. So please go to the store, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. Take it every day. You don't want to look like this guy, okay? Don't look like this guy. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the multivitamins, and get the lignans, and get the omega-3, so you don't look like this guy, okay?
Gaza. I think the latest draw I saw from officials in Gaza, the health minister is 93, that Israel has said that it identified 31 militants in this one. I mean, how much credence do you put this? I mean, do you think that even if 31 militants were killed, that means another 60 plus non-militants died in this? What's the nature of the assessment that the U.S. has, both on the facts on the ground whether there's any level of concern.
So first, John, let me just say we are deeply concerned about this weekend's horrific incident on the Al Tabeen school in Gaza City that killed a number of people sheltering in place. And our hearts go out to the families of those who lost loved ones, and we are praying for a speedy recovery for those who have been injured. We have been clear, both to our partners in Israel, that every possible effort needs to be taken to minimize the impact of civilian casualties. But again, as we have seen in this instance, as our Israeli partners indicated, that there were a number of Hamas militants using civilian infrastructure, in this case a school, to hide amongst that. And so we condemn and deplore any attempt by terrorists to hide amongst civilians in or under protected facilities. That needs to stop. Sites such as schools may lose their protected status under international law when they're used by combatants. But that certainly does not take away from the moral and strategic imperative that our partners in Israel have to take every possible step to make sure that the loss of civilian life, impacts to civilians, is not mitigated. And that's something we'll continue to stress apparently. On this specific strike and incident, we continue to be in close coordination with our partners in the IDF and have continued to solicit more information around it, but I don't have any information beyond that.
Sure. On the more information, is there any?
All right. So this for this State Department briefing, it's kind of boring. So I'm going to end the broadcast, but please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60, which is a very strong antioxidant. I have it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, and an 8 ounce configuration. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil. Take a teaspoon of it a day. It's a very potent antioxidant, and because of that, it'll soak up those free radicals. Your cells are going to be healthier. Your mitochondria will be boosted up. You're going to have more ATP, and you'll notice that over time, those cells and your tissues will start to slow down the aging process. As we get older, we have a buildup of reactive oxygen species, okay, ROSs, all right, these free radicals. To slow down the aging process, part of the pillar of anti-aging is to reduce those free radicals. And that's why you take C60, is to reduce those free radicals. The other pillar is to bring down inflammation. I told you how to do that with ashwagandha and turmerics. And you want to neutralize pathogens by taking the structural nanosilvers. When you do that, that's the core, and then you add stuff around it, like the multivitamins and the B complex and the lignans and the digestive enzymes and the olive leaf extract. And that way you're really boosting up your health. It works. It is costly, you know, there is a cost to it, but this is a lot cheaper, and you're going to have more vitality than letting your body age, and you're paying much higher costs in healthcare, and your vitality is a lot lower. So you pick. Pay more later and have less vitality, or pay a little bit and invest in your body and have the vitality. It's up to you. But what I'm telling you works. So go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day. Please ask your social media to follow me. Follow my social media or my website, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.